everyone, and welcome back to my podcast, Life of an Artrepreneur. I hope you're all doing really well. Here is an update, basically, of what I've been doing over the past few weeks, because I feel like I haven't really sat down and recorded any podcasts for quite a while, because before I went away, I scheduled like 3. So for about 3 weeks, I've not really recorded any podcasts. So I'm glad to be sat down and back sort of filming and recording today. Most of June, I was kind of travelling around. I went to Crete, which I think I mentioned in a previous episode. And then I actually went on a cruise around the Med with 2 of my best friends. And prior to that, we were in Barcelona for 2 nights, 3 days, which was really nice. But yeah, I've never been on a cruise before. So I was like, am I going to get seasick? Am I going to need seasickness tablets? But luckily you couldn't really feel it. Maybe like 2 or 3 times you could feel it, but it wasn't really that bad because the ship was so big that you couldn't really feel it. So it was fine. So the cruise started in Barcelona. Then it went to the south of France. So we went to Marseille and Cannes. Then we went to Palma, Ibiza, and then back to Barcelona. So it was just a nice sort of trip around France and Spain, really. But yeah, it was so good to be like in one place one day and then wake up and be in a completely different place. I'd never been on a cruise before, so in terms of that, it was really good. And just the ship that we went on was the Virgin Voyages Scarlet Lady, and honestly, I couldn't recommend it enough. The food, the experience, the service, like every single room that you went into on the ship, you'd literally be like, wow. Like, it was so good. When we docked back up in Barcelona, ready to come home, we were all so depressed. We were just like, oh, I wish we could stay on for like another 3 weeks. It was really, really good. Like, I really want to do it again. And apparently they do another route that does like a Greek one. So you go to like Santorini and Mykonos, Rhodes, can't remember anywhere else. Corfu, I think, maybe was one of them. But that looked really good as well, so we'll see. But honestly, it was incredible. I just wish I was going again, really. But here we are, back to the podcasting. Last week, I actually went down to London because I won 2 tickets through Derwent, which is the pencil brand. And I actually forgot all about it. I think I entered the competition by just tagging myself and a few other artists on their Instagram post, which was like the competition to win the tickets to a workshop down in London. Then I completely forgot about it, and I got the message when I was on the cruise, and I was like, oh, brilliant, because I literally never win anything. So the tickets were to Zoe Fitchett's workshop at the Mall Galleries in London, which is actually where the David Shepherd Wildlife Artist of the Year exhibition is held like every year. I did ask some of my artist friends if they wanted to come because I had the 2 tickets, but they were all either busy or working, and it is quite a long way to go down to London and back, you know, in one day. So I dragged Conrad with me, who has 0 experience in drawing or anything like that. He's just a complete amateur. But I was actually quite impressed with his effort, and I think deep down he probably enjoyed it. It was so lovely to meet Zoe in person as well, because we've been speaking for quite a long time online, but never actually met her in person before. And it was nice to kind of attend a workshop rather than teach one and see all the incredible work at the exhibition after it as well. Considering that I've entered my work 5 times in the David Shepherd Wildlife Artist of the Year competition, I'd never actually been down to see the exhibition at the Mall Gallery. So I was walking around and I was like, wow, at all of the work. I literally took pictures of probably 90% of it. I was honestly just in awe at everything. The standard and the level of the work is just ridiculous. But yeah, definitely gave me a lot of inspiration for next year. So that's just kind of a little bit of what I've been up to over the past few weeks or so. And, you know, after all that and all my traveling and doing bits and bobs, I've just been sort of catching up with everything, getting back into Patreon stuff, my podcast, catching up on about a month's worth of admin. But yeah, just got to be done. But that's basically what's been going on over the past sort of month or so. So I thought in this episode I'd talk about workshops because it kind of links to what I've been doing, you know, last week, obviously attending Zoe's workshop. And I thought I'd talk about what to expect from a workshop, my experience in teaching one in the past, plans for the future, and things to consider if you're also thinking of teaching a workshop or an art class. So my experience with teaching a workshop sort of happened by chance, really. I had some work exhibited at the Green and Stone Gallery down in London. It was their summer exhibition 2023, so last summer. And I got talking to the director of the gallery. She was really nice. And she kind of just asked me if I'd be interested in teaching a workshop, as my work was quite like specialised, being like the tight, realistic style of drawing, which was very different in comparison to a lot of the like looser drawings and paintings that were in the exhibition. So of course I said yes, and having never taught an art class before, I was a bit like, oh my God, at first. But then I tried not to think about it too much until nearer the time, because I knew it was going to be a good experience. I still wanted to do it. At first I was just like, freaking out a bit, but no, it was fine. I was more excited for it than I was nervous. And the workshop was going to be like months and months after she'd asked me anyway. So it wasn't like it was going to be in a week's time. So I had time to sort of prepare myself for it and figure out what I wanted to do. One thing that gave me confidence to begin with, and one of the reasons why I said yes really, was because I'd already been teaching on Patreon for years, for like 2.5 years at that point. So I had experience like explaining my process and demonstrating every step of what I was doing. And I think if I hadn't have had that, I think it would have felt a lot more like, I would have felt more imposter syndrome, I think, thinking, am I good enough to do this? Do I know what I'm talking about? How do I explain it? But to be honest, I think whatever you do that's new and very much out of your comfort zone, you always have a sense of that feeling anyway, kind of feeling a bit, having that bit of imposter syndrome. So I think that's completely normal. But yeah, definitely having the Patreon experience and me teaching all the time online definitely helped with my confidence, and I knew kind of how to explain things already. So depending on the size of your class, you'll need to factor in your costs. So if it's one of your first classes, the likelihood is your expenses will be quite a lot, which I figured out when I did this class. So I guess I was quite lucky with having my first workshop at the actual Green and Stone Gallery, because the venue was just sorted then because it was at the actual gallery. And a lot of the materials were provided already, like most of the pencils. I had a big, huge projector screen which I could use, all like refreshments and everything like that. They sorted all of that out, which was really, really helpful for me. But I still bought quite a lot of pencils in preparation for the workshop, because I wanted everyone to have every single colour and pencil and tool that they needed, so they could literally follow me step by step when I was demonstrating and explaining every step of the drawing. I don't like the fact that I could, scatter a few pencils around and say sort of, share them between yourselves, especially with coloured pencils. Like, there's such a specific process to follow. It's very much like layer by layer, that you kind of all need the same pencils at the same time. So I didn't want everyone to be sharing and needing all the same colour at the same time and not having enough of everything. So I just wanted everyone to have exactly what they needed and they could all follow along at the same time. And I did teach the workshop very much like I'd teach a tutorial on Patreon. So it was very step by step, very layer by layer. So I did buy quite a lot of pencils, but at the same time I thought, well, if I do workshops in the future, or even if I don't, I'm always going to be using coloured pencils. So it's not like I've just wasted that money. So now I've got a cupboard full of just spares of pencils, which will always come in handy at some point, whether that's future art classes or for my own work. If you're putting on your own workshop, then the venue is such a huge part. You want it to be easily accessible for people to get to, and you want the room to be big enough. You don't want people kind of like sitting on top of each other. You want to make sure it's bright with natural lighting, or sort of warm and cozy, depending on what your whole sort of vibe is, or what medium you're working in, or just what's available to you in your area. I guess you'll be needing like taps and sinks if you're using paints or pastels, because they're quite messy as well. And I guess for coloured pencils, you just need like bright natural light, so you can see all of those details and see what you're working on that's quite intricate. The preparation and planning is probably the most important part in making sure your workshop runs smoothly. I think ensuring your workshop has that structure and, making sure that people can complete the drawing in a specific time frame is really important. I remember practicing what we'd be drawing in the workshop beforehand like 2 or 3 times, and I kept cropping it down a little bit, making it a bit smaller, because every single time I'd kind of go over the time limit. I actually had to cut a few steps out in the end just to make sure people would actually finish it in time and just cover all the important parts. But even still, we did run over slightly, but yeah, we were pretty much all finished anyway. So in my workshop, I demonstrated how to draw a realistic horse's eye, and I think it was about 4x4 inches in the end. I think when I was practicing, I started off with 6x6 inches, realised it was way too big for the 2 hours that we had in the workshop, and ended up cropping it to about 4x4 inches. But I definitely didn't factor in the time element in terms of like all the chatting, welcoming everyone, setting up things, having a bit of a short break in between the workshop, helping people one-on-one and answering questions and stuff like that. Like all of that takes up quite a lot of time in your art class, and that's definitely something that when you're preparing for it, you don't necessarily think that's a main factor. So from my experience, I definitely recommend allowing sort of 15 to 20 minutes extra time just to help it run smoothly, so you're not as tight for time and you can still feel like you can chat to everyone without thinking, oh, you need to rush through this. Drawing out everyone's outlines beforehand and sort of cropping the page down to size, printing out all your reference photos, getting everything like that organised will save so much time. And then at least people won't be worrying about, getting the accurate proportions or the actual drawing part. They can just straight away focus on the coloured pencil element and just get stuck into that straight away without worrying about outlines. And I guess that's probably the same for whatever medium you're teaching in. I'd also take extra of things like extra pencils, maybe take a few extra little outlines just in case someone might, spill something on one, or they might want to completely start again from scratch, or they might want to take one home. Just preparing things like that really helps you just kind of stay organised when you're actually teaching and running the actual art class. Consider the layout of the tables and how you're actually going to be teaching. So whether you'll be teaching in the middle of everyone, whether they'll all be like around you, or whether people will be on sort of separate tables. When I was doing mine, I was teaching and drawing sat at one of the tables, and I was kind of live streaming at the same time, which was shown on a big projector behind me. And because I was working on something that was really quite small, and obviously depending on how many people are at your class, you want everyone to be able to see clearly what you're drawing and what you're talking through and explaining. So I think having that projector behind me was actually really helpful in terms of, those people that were a little bit further away on those tables, more at like the back of the room. They could still see what I was doing on a larger scale on the projector in real time. So like I said before, I kind of explained and worked through the drawing step by step, just like I'd do, teaching a tutorial. And I also created a step-by-step booklet, which was very organised of me. So everyone had the drawn out outline ready to start. They had all the pencils that they needed in order that they were going to be using them in. They also had a printed out booklet which had various stages of the drawing, and I'd like screenshot how the drawing should look at various stages as well, including what colours I'd used at that point and the main sort of techniques. So they could follow through that as well as following along me drawing. It was just an extra option. So if someone sort of fell behind or they were working a bit faster than everyone else, they could refer to that booklet to know what the next few steps were. Looking back, maybe it was a bit too much planning, a bit too much structure, but at the same time, at least I felt organised and like prepared going into that workshop, because you don't want to be going into something like that and feeling really unprepared for it, because that's when you start getting a bit nervous, and you don't want that. You want to feel like you know what you're talking about and you've got everything organised and sorted. And the feedback that I received at the end was really positive. So I think they kind of liked my teaching style, as they knew what they were doing at all times. They never really got lost. And I also got up and helped people individually, gave people pointers and showed them what they could improve on and how, which again, it was quite nice to help people one-on-one as well. And I also gave them the option of taking the booklet home. And I had a few spares of the outline. So I think a few people took the outline home, took the booklet home, so they could have another go at it if they wanted to. I think reflect on how your first one went and alter things to make sure your next one is even better. So ask people who attended how they found it, kind of read the room a little bit. And from each class, I just feel like you'll learn something different from like every single interaction that you have with people. If you're completely new to workshops or art classes, you might have attended some in the past and you thought, actually, I've been drawing for quite a while now. I want to be the one that's teaching the classes rather than attending them. But you feel like you've not had that teaching experience, then my advice is to probably practice talking through your process or writing down your steps, or literally like recording yourself on a voice note, listening to it back and thinking, how could I explain that in a easier, simplified way so people can understand better? Because if I hadn't have had those years of teaching on Patreon under my belt, I think I would have freaked out a little bit, and I definitely wouldn't have felt as confident, to be honest. I think teaching and figuring out how you come across to people is definitely a skill that takes a lot of practice, and I guess the more that you do, the more you'll build your confidence and become more comfortable over time. Even like start a YouTube channel if you've not done already, and practice just talking into a camera and see how you're coming across, because you can always reflect on that, and then the next one that you do, you'll probably see over time how your confidence is getting better and you're just looking and coming across as more confident. So I guess that's the same with teaching. The more you do something, the more you feel like you know what you're on about. But remember, not everyone is there at the workshop to be like the next Picasso. Some people just want to meet new people or try something new. So your art class could be quite chilled. It doesn't have to be like a tutorial style workshop like I did. It could be a lot more chilled. For example, the workshop that I went to the other week, which was Zoe Fitchett's down in London, she didn't work through it as well as everyone else. She'd already drawn an example which she passed round, and she sort of explained through the colours, she explained through the motions and the pencil strokes, how to kind of apply the pencil. She talked about layers a little bit. So she kind of gave us an introduction, showed us her example, showed us some pencil strokes, and then we all just kind of got on with it. Everyone was just fully focused on what they were doing, and everyone's was slightly different as well in terms of the colours that they were choosing. So yeah, I guess every workshop's different, and it just depends on your teaching style. It depends on a lot of things really. The location, who's going, how many people are there, whether anyone can come, whether it's artists specifically. Different people, you'll have to tweak your teaching style too, I guess. You can kind of read the room from the get-go. Zoe said she'd taught quite a few different groups of people, and her teaching style sort of changed to fit what they sort of needed at the time. So she's done more like one-on-one stuff, and she's taught like children, I think. So that was obviously not a step-by-step tutorial. It was obviously a lot more chilled. So yeah, just all depends really. I know that paint and sip style classes have become so popular, especially in the last like year or so, and especially in like cities like Manchester. I know there's so many going on. There's one in Preston actually. Me and Shannon have just booked to go to one in August, mid-August. So that should be fun. We're painting a zebra. So I said we'll end up drawing like a tiny little eye in about 2 hours, and everyone else will be drawing like the full thing, actually following along. But no, it should be good. It'll force us to kind of loosen up a little bit, and it's always good to kind of listen to how other people teach and come across. But yeah, a paint and sip style art class is basically where you can go and have a few drinks, like a prosecco or whatever, and you learn to paint something. You can leave with like a little canvas of whatever you've painted. You get to meet new people, and it's like an alternative to like a night out really, something a lot more chilled. Which I think is why a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards the paint and sip classes, because it's just something a little bit different. You could go with your partner, you could go on your own, you could go with a group of friends. Like, it's just a good little night out, I think, where you can come home with a piece of artwork that you've done. I've been back and forth with a few places about workshops or teaching paint and sip classes, and I guess it's just finding the right location. And I think putting one on completely by myself would be amazing, but obviously it'd be a lot more expensive because I'd have to buy all the paint palettes, brushes. I do have quite a lot of paints, to be honest, from uni. I think frequently teaching coloured pencil workshops to complete beginners would be very expensive in terms of constantly, having the right colours and providing them to everyone. And you wouldn't think coloured pencils are expensive, but they actually really are. When you buy like individual ones, individual colours, especially the luminance pencils, the Caran d'Ache luminance pencils are quite pricey. So I can see why people do paint and sip classes, because obviously you can buy all the paints and they'll last you for ages, and you can use that one tube of paint and give everyone a little bit of that colour, kind of spread it around. So yeah, and I do have painting experience because I mainly did oil painting at uni. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I have been back and forth with a few places and we'll see how it pans out. But I think it would definitely be a good thing to get into. It's just a lot more chilled than like a workshop every month that would be quite intense, I guess. Although I did absolutely love the one that I did at the Green and Stone Gallery. There was 7 people and a few people left early to get trains and stuff, but it was nice. It was just like a nice intimate class, so I feel like I could actually go around and talk to everyone and help everyone one-on-one, whereas if it was a bigger class, I'm not sure if I'd feel like I could be able to do that and give everyone the guidance and attention that they might need to help them improve if there's quite a lot of people. But yeah, I guess the more that you do and the variety that you do, the more you figure out what kind of art classes you like teaching, I guess. So there's swings and roundabouts to everything, but yeah, I guess it's really rewarding teaching in person and being able to guide people one-on-one and see their reactions or get their feedback like firsthand. One of my patrons actually came to my workshop as well, which was so nice because I've been teaching her for ages online, but putting a face to the name was really nice. So you just make better connections, I think, like teaching in person. But then I guess you can reach such a wider audience online. So yeah, again, swings and roundabouts. But yeah, that's all my notes on workshops. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of the week. If you've been watching on YouTube, then please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to see more episodes, artist vlogs, travel vlogs and tutorials. If you've been listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then please remember to leave a review because I really like to hear your feedback and it does help to push the podcast. So yeah, thank you for watching or listening Life of an Artrepreneur, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode.